A few videos ago, I planted up this Gardena vertical planter here outside my kitchen door, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update on it. So since then, it's really grown on, and the plants inside, so the variety of lettuces, have given me quite a few little mini harvests. So I've been coming out here and picking a few leaves at a time for veggie burger garnishes and to make fresh salads, and it's been really convenient. So I just open the door, pick some leaves, and I'm back inside, and it's literally garden to plate within a matter of minutes. And it's really made a really great use out of this kind of dead space that I have here on my step outside the door. So I'm pretty happy about that right now. The one thing that I'm keeping an eye on, though, with all of my containers at this time of the year is keeping them well watered. And it's super important to do that. And we can be distracted this time of the year, so going out to picnics, to the beach, just spending time in the sun with our friends and our family. And we kind of forget that our container plants and plants out in the garden might actually be suffering in the sun. So the sun is evaporating water out of the compost here, and if your plants get too stressed, they won't flourish. And in the case of lettuces and some other edibles, spinach in particular, if they get underwatered, so if the compost gets too dry, they'll basically turn to flower, they'll bolt, and then the leaves will turn bitter and you won't get the harvest that you really want. So what I'm doing is I'm coming out every couple of days and watering each one of the pockets of this planter and all of my other containers. Now right now it's every couple of days, and I'm checking the compost first by putting my finger in it just to make sure that it's moist enough. Or if it's getting too dry, then it gets watering. Later on in the summer, it'll be every day probably that I'm coming out and topping up the water a little bit. And in that way, I'm ensuring that my plants are healthy and happy, and that I get the most productivity out of my vertical planter here without having to replant it. Now, the same goes for the plants that are in the greenhouse and also out in the garden, keeping them well watered. So I'm going to now go out to the greenhouse and get on top of those guys, because I've just watered these guys out here on the steps. And then we're going to go out into the allotment garden, because I have a little bit of an experiment, and I'm going to plant that out, and I think you'll be intrigued to see how it does as well. Well, that was easy enough to roll around the side of the house. And in case you're wondering, my hose pipe is the AquaRoll M from Gardena. And it's super handy for a couple of reasons. So first of all, it's on that reel. It makes it really easy to wind up, and I can take it out into the garden or around the house or whatnot. It's got a really stable kickstand on it, so it will stay in place while you're watering. And also it's easy to store, so I can keep it in the garage, I can keep it in the shed, and also I can take it up to the allotment garden. So it fits in the boot of my car, and that ensures that I'm not going to have any fights for hose pipes with anyone else at the site. So watering will be even easier. Just realized something weird as well. I'm a plant petter. Are you a plant petter too? So every time I come into the greenhouse or in the conservatory when plants are growing in there, I have to touch my plants. Do you do the same thing? Am I just weird? Leave it as a comment below. Tell me if you're a plant petter as well. So what I have growing here in the greenhouse is I have my pumpkins and squashes coming up here. A lot of them have germinated, but some of them haven't. And these are seeds mainly from the seed swap that I organize every year. And it's hit or miss sometimes, but I've got plenty of free plants growing here, including Queensland Blue, and I've got this blue banana. This actually came from a swap with a friend, interested to grow that. Yellow courgettes, called zucchini as well. And all along here I have my sunflowers. These are my spare brassicas, so I have some kale here and cabbage, Brussels sprouts in the back. And back here I have a tray of lettuces, and it has some coriander, cilantro in the center, and then two different types of lettuce mixes here. So when watering these guys, first of all, I dip my finger in, or just press at the top a little bit. Is it wet? Is it really dry? You really want to go for something that's in between. And then when I'm actually watering, I avoid watering the leaves when possible. When they're little plants like these, sometimes it's difficult. So these lettuces here. So if you're going to water them, it's better to do it kind of later in the evening so that the water has a chance to evaporate off before the harsh sunlight comes through the greenhouse. Plant petting again. So this year I'm growing Tigerella tomatoes again, and that's because I took stem cuttings late last summer from the plants I was growing then, allowed them to grow roots, and then I overwintered the plant inside the house, and then I've just planted these guys back out again a couple of weeks ago, and they're doing great. Now, the trick with keeping these guys happy and healthy here in the greenhouse is watering. So they're nice and warm in here. They've got some great compost, so farmyard manure that they're growing in down here, and it does actually retain water quite well. But if these guys get dried out, so the roots get a bit dry when they've got fruit on them, what can happen is that the fruit will expand and crack when you water that plant again, because the roots will suck up that water, it'll be super thirsty, and that water will go straight into that juicy fruit. And so that's where those cracks come from. And once your fruit has cracks in it, then it doesn't last as long, it attracts fruit flies, etc. So keeping tomatoes and other veggies well watered in the greenhouse environment is super important. So my first tip on them is always to water from the base. Another issue with tomatoes is that if you water the leaves, that light will refract through the greenhouse and through that water, and it will scorch the leaves. And that happened to me in the past. Has that ever happened to you as well? Basically, you see little brown marks on the leaves, and at the time I thought it was blight or some other disease, and it really made me worried. And I just found out from another gardener at the time, just make sure to always water from the base. And also, my other tip, this is something that I discovered, is to sink some oyas into the compost near your tomato plants. Oyas were traditionally used in arid climates to keep plants watered under the ground. So people would sink these terracotta pots into the ground, fill them with water regularly, and that way the plant roots can attach to the sides and draw water when they need it. And that also helps water from evaporating from the surface, so watering from below makes a lot more sense in those climates. And in a warm greenhouse, it's the same, especially with tomatoes. Now, if you want to buy custom-made oyas, they are dear, but you can make them using ordinary plant pots that you can get from the garden center. So these are just normal terracotta pots, and I have a video on how to make them and how to plug up the bottom and how to use them. So head over there to learn more about those guys. But needless to say, these are really important to me for keeping my tomatoes healthy and happy here in the greenhouse. This is the experiment I was telling you about earlier. So I saw this video last year showing how to grow peas in a gutter. And this is the first time I've tried it, and I'm going to plant them out finally into the allotment today. So the benefits of growing them this way is that out in the allotment, as you know, I've got problems with pheasants, and everyone's got problems with slugs pretty much. So I've been able to grow them in a very controlled environment, keep an eye on them, and now that they're of a good size, I can put them out into the ground in the allotment, and they will grow on with a little bit of a head start. So let's head out and get them in the ground. was a lot easier getting the peas here than I thought it would be. And they're all just sitting here in the gutter. And there's a huge difference between the compost that they're growing in, which is nice and moist, and the ground here. But if I dig down just a little bit, you'll see it's nice and dark under there. And that's because I've got a nice mulch of manure on top, and that helps to keep the soil nice and moist for them. So the plan for these guys is that I'm going to be moving this netting over a bit, and I'm going to give the peas the protection of the netting for the first couple of weeks. I'll put some pea sticks in there for them to grow on, but this is a dwarf variety called Meteor, and it will only get to about 18 inches tall. And I guess you'd want to grow a dwarf variety of pea for a couple of reasons. First of all, I have quite an exposed site up here. So if you look down the glen, winds come and whip right down the valley here, right down in that direction, and they can decimate really tall plants. Another reason to grow a dwarf variety is if you don't have the vertical space, or you're planting in a bed with lots of other plants like in here. And the last reason is if you get started a little bit late in the season, you can catch up with dwarf varieties, whereas larger varieties will take just a little bit too long to mature in some cases. Well, the peas are in, and that was relatively easy to slide them out of that gutter. And I've watered them in really well. So I stood there for a good few minutes, making sure that the ground was soaking wet and that it leaches into that soil, and that the mulch on top, which I kind of spread around on the tops of the pea compost, will help to lock the moisture in. So fantastic, they're all in. I'm excited to see that that technique actually works. And I'm also really pleased with how the AquaRoll did up here at the allotment. It was easy to wheel onto the site. I plugged it up to the, or hooked it up to the tap, no problem. And I can see that becoming a real asset this summer when the demand on the hose pipes here, the communal hose pipes, becomes quite high. So really pleased with that as well. If you have any questions about watering or tomatoes, propagating tomatoes, or the Gardena products that were in this video, please leave me a comment down below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And then next week, we'll be back again with another allotment update. There's a lot growing this time of the year. We're all very busy in our gardens, and I'll give you a sneak peek as to what's happening here at my allotment. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next week.